conversation is still closed. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting, everybody. We're going to open with a karakia this morning. Karakia tātou. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki roto, tue ki waho, tue tātou ki tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, a mauri ora, a kia tātou katoa. In terms of Zoom, Councillor Butler's on Zoom. I can't quite see who else is there. If you are on Zoom, just remember to keep your mic muted. Thank you. And to note that the meeting's been recorded and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. The media are present and they may be filming part or all of this meeting or even taking photographs. Hearing assistance is available in the public gallery for those that may need it. And just a note to councillors that we have our workshop commencing at 1:30 today until 4 p.m. and we'll need to finish in time for you to have a bit of a break. I'll move to apologies. We have apologies from the Mayor, Deputy Mayor Bryant and Councillors Walker and Greening. Is somebody happy to move the apologies? Councillor Mailing and second and Councillor Ellis. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We have no public forum speakers this morning. Are there any declarations of interest? So we move to confirmation of minutes. And there are 3 sets of minutes. Minutes of Environmental Regulatory Committee meeting held on Thursday, 10th of August 2024, be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Is somebody happy to move? Councillor Dakey and Councillor Kinnamont. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. The minutes of the confidential minutes of the meeting, Environmental Regulatory meeting on 10th of August. Is somebody happy to move? Councillor Dakey, Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And the minutes of the Animals Control Subcommittee meeting held on Wednesday the 4th of September be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. That'd have to be Councillor Mailing because you were there. And a seconder from someone else who was there. Well, I'll second them. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Which moves us to the first of our 6 reports today. So over to you, Kim. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll first start with just a couple of items that flowed on from the action items from the minutes of the last meeting that fell to me or members of my group. The first was to look into inconsistencies with staff email signatures. So that matter has been looked into, and the issue as raised in the public forum, the person who presented on that has been advised of the outcome and clarified that how that situation came about. The second matter that we're asked to follow up on related to how other building teams have their performance assessed across the country. So this was around the consent satisfaction off the back of our survey showing a relatively low satisfaction rate given the question that was asked of them. And I would just ask Matt just to pop up to the front table and just summarise the work that he's done looking across the building assurance teams across the country.
Morning to you, Madam Chair. So what I've done is just gone to 8 different councils around our sort of mainland cluster and just checked in on how they're, how they are surveyed, and some don't do surveys and others it's a council-wide survey. Some do a survey monkey that goes out with each consent. Some go out with inspections as well, and some go out and they also go out with the co-compliance certificates. So they can just feedback, sort of live, I guess, and it's fresh in their minds, and there's less confusion around, the RMA and the Building Act. I only heard back from one of the councillors of the sort of percentage they got for customer satisfaction, and that wasn't for a SurveyMonkey situation, but they were like at 86% satisfied. Their customers were satisfied with their performance. But yeah, other than that, that was pretty much all the information I got from them. But sounds like the SurveyMonkey might be a good way of doing it to get some clearer information.
Thank you, Matt. So just for reinforce to councillors, at the moment we look at their satisfaction once a year at the end of the year by asking folk to recollect their experience they had with building consents, and we're currently reviewing that approach to see whether that's the most effective way of getting that level of satisfaction accurately assessed. So the work that Matt has done there will feed into a review of how we're currently assessing things, and we will come back to you if we think that this current system ought to be changed. So thanks for that, Matt. Now moving on to my report, I'll take that as read, but I do want to emphasise a couple of areas. First up, the submission on the Department of Internal Affairs draft regulations for natural hazard information going on to LIMS from 1 July this year suggests that the information provision is going to be increase in importance. So it's a general theme in the government that information needs to be more freely available to members of the public. And our sense is that this is one of those elements where the Department of Internal Affairs has got onto the LIMS aspect of it. And you'll note that in my report, I'm seeking retrospective approval of our response to the proposals that the department put out. Second point, I want to emphasise that the government's reform agenda is well and truly up and running. So we're deep into phase 2 of those reforms now, and we're all getting early signals of what phase 3 is going to be all about, which is really the future-orientated legislative framework. Third point I want to make is that the recent moves by the Solicitor General to update prosecution guidelines gives increased emphasis on separating perceived and potential political influence on enforcement decisions. And related to that, the recent prosecution of Aswood Limited reinforces the need to have an active monitoring program that works in harmony with a complaint response service. And in the case of that particular prosecution, we've had the lead compliance officer hopefully in attendance today. Is that correct, Shane? Is Kathy coming through? Just in case, during the course of my report, there's any councillors want to sort of check in as to how that process actually went, because it's quite a significant decision. There's about $190,000 of both fines and costs that have been imposed on that operator, and several lessons for us in terms of how important compliance monitoring, proactive compliance monitoring is to assess levels of compliance in our community, rather than just rely on a more complaint response driven. And you'll see in my suggestions here that we are looking to establish guidelines across the whole spectrum of enforcement approaches, compliance monitoring approaches, and complaint response approaches, so that the community gets a picture of how all of those three elements of regulatory functions are harmonised within this council, because it's quite a challenging and tricky area to work within. So with those points, I'm happy to hand over to you to deal with any questions that may arise from my report.
Councillor Maru, and then Councillor Kinamore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. So the natural hazards and limb reports, are we currently putting them on? So I like your submission, because the difference between national data, local data, and what the heck actually gets reported on, and the definition of knowing, or I'm just confused in terms of, so if we take Motueka for a sense, if it's not a flood hazard, it's a liquefaction hazard, or up in the back ones, it's a fire hazard. Perceived, so how do we know, when does it start, and when do you expect to get some answers in terms of correlation between national and local data and different data sets? It's a minefield. That's the first question.
So through the chair on that one, I'll have a few opening comments, but Amy might be better placed to wrap it up. one of the things that is quite interesting here is that Taitura, so that's the representative of the executive arm of council, have likewise put quite a substantive submission in this because they recognise the importance and the significance of these expectations. And when you talk to Taitura, you're talking to both the regional and the territorial arms of government, local government. And they had pointed out a number of inconsistencies and further clarification was required. And because as a unitary council, we are effectively in the same space. So at a local level, we are seeing the inconsistencies and the challenges that Taitura are seeing nationally. And so those two submissions developed independently are both telling the same story, that there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before clarity is sort of provided through a regulatory system that says precisely what a local government entity ought to be know of, where it should get its information, how it should make it available, and all those sorts of things. And so we're 6 months away from these regulations taking effect, and we're quite concerned that the regulatory framework that's been put in front of us really doesn't address those questions. So I don't think I've given an answer to your question. I think I've echoed your concern, but I will hand to Amy, who's got more knowledge of these things.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am not sure that I have any answers in addition to Kim. We are waiting for DIA to come back with those clarifications and hopefully the regulations and the associated guidelines that will come out. They've indicated early 2025 for the regulations, but we don't know what early is. And given we understand that they've received a lot of feedback from a number of groups and councils, it may take them a while to work through those.
So just a follow up to you, Madam Chair, so are we currently not listing anything on LIM reports?
No, through the chair, we currently provide a comprehensive summary of the natural hazards information that council is aware of for each property for which we provide a LIM. And we do so in a way that puts it in plain language for people who request a LIM. So we are providing comprehensive natural hazards information on LIM currently.
And the terminology, I think, through the chair is that the bathtub modelling that's referred to in the submission made to DIA?
So the bathtub modelling that the council is referring to there, that's one of the pieces of information that we potentially refer to in a LIM comment where it's relevant, and that information is also currently available on the TDC website as part of the coastal management project, which was undertaken around 2019-2020. But I think the example that we were using there was that this is an example where council has done its own work, but NIWA has also produced a national data set, and we're aware of that national data set. And so one of the questions that the council was raising before was around that issue of known, and so one of the things that we were seeking clarification from DIA was, well, if council's done its own work, but there's also a national data set, which data set should take precedence? Should we provide both of those data sets to a party that requests a LIM? And how does DIA expect us to sort of reconcile providing all of that information with the overall aim of the regulations, which is for LIMs to be clear and concise and not overwhelming? Because it does seem like they're casting a very, very wide net in terms of what they expect council to provide.
Thank you. My final question on this, and I'll go to the bottom of the list, is when does the natural hazard mapping become public again? Because it's currently locked down.
So I can't recall the exact date. I know that there's a short workshop session that Diana and Paula have planned with the councillors, I think, in early December. And as previously mentioned, we don't have any intention to make that publicly available before we've had the chance to socialise that with the councillors first.
You're not wanting to raise other things now?
Oh, I can go to the bottom of this.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Just a conclusory summary point on this is that this increasing emphasis and focus on LIMs has been recognised by the executive team here, and there's going to be an increased sort of demand bogus regulatory requirements. So we very much have this matter under our eyes at the moment, and we're looking to make sure that the future provision of LIM services across the council are going to meet whatever regulatory standards are going to come out of this for us. And so we we anticipate some changes in the way that we currently do the processing. Not that what we're doing at the moment is not meeting current requirements, it's just that we anticipate that future requirements are going to be greater. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kinmont.
Thank you, through the chair, and very much aligned with Councillor Mararu's question as well. A land developer has spoken to me about a limb requirement that it was a hail site. He's done a soil test and it's not a hail site. So is the process now so that he's now taken off the register because there's no hazards on his site now? Or is that yet to come? Does that part be developed? So once we've developed the system of reporting, capturing and reporting, is that in place now, or is that to happen in the future?
Kia ora, through the chair, if that's okay. So hail is quite a different process, hazardous activities industries list, to the hazard stuff, natural hazards that Alistair's talking about. So for a hail, if the former activity had occurred on the site, that's why it would have been nominated. So typically in our district, it would be an orchard that was in place 1880s through to 1960s or something. So then it would be a hail, and then you then do the subsequent testing to see whether you meet the standards for that subdivision. So what we would do if it was found not to be exceeding those conditions, so not above background, then it would be classed as an error site. And so it stays in the register, but it would be called an error site so that the next person that looks at any aerial photos and says, oh, that's a hazard site, they would say, no, it's not. We can check the register. That was sampled and cleared. So it would have a tag on it, something like sampled and suitable. The reality is, though, that there's the nuance around the levels. So it may still be above background, so it's still a hail site, but it might be suitable for residential. So there's some on the work on the margin there, and the best person to talk to that is, like Alistair for hazards, would be Anna McKenzie for hail. All right. Yeah.
Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thanks, Kim, for your report and keeping us up to date on on what's happening. I've got two questions. The first one is where it talks about key aspects of the new resource management system that will come through in phase 2 and 3. And on page 6, it talks about realising efficiencies by requiring councils to jointly prepare one regulatory plan for their region. So under the previous legislation, we had planned to work with Nelson City in terms of the work that we were doing on our TEP, and then we had sort of put that on hold. So I'm assuming that where they say, or in the report it says region, that the region encompasses Tasman and Nelson City. Is that still a definition of a region? And if it is this saying that we would expect then to recommence a process of having a joint new plan?
So through the chair on that one, well, not being able to speak, what's precisely in the heads of the government on this. What we have seen is that a lot of what is deemed to be parts of completing phase 2 and what has been signalled in phase 3 very much reaches back and picks out bits out of what was the combination of the Natural Built Environment Act and the Spatial Planning Act. So rather than those things being completely, those acts were taken out of play, but elements of them appear to be surviving into the new regime. We don't have the specification yet to tell us precisely which bits will be carried forward. There was certainly some strong bits that the sector was advocating for, particularly in relation to things like new enforcement tools and ability to recover costs. They were very well developed and well supported in the MBA, and we anticipate that they will flow through into the new system and under phase 3. Your suggestions, I think, are entirely plausible, that we will be facing the prospect of back to the future in terms of looking at the region as one in a planning context, but those decisions have not been explicitly signalled by the government. So we wait with bated breath, I guess, is the only responsible answer I can give to that.
Thank you. It's a curious world we live in, isn't it? But so I guess we'll just need to be mindful of that in terms of the work that we're doing to, review parts of the TRMP with the fact that that may come down. All right, thank you. And then my other question related to the paragraphs around the Finance and Expenditure Committee report and implications for New Zealand's adaptation framework. And paragraph 4.16, it talks about projects becoming beneficiary pays and exacerbator pays. And I thought it might be useful if you could just maybe expand out what that means a little bit more. But then the paragraph goes on to say, this potentially could impact TDC in a financial sense. It talks about councils collaborating with central government to secure resources, get money, and I'm wondering from what pool or how, or so could you just give us a bit more information about this paragraph?
Through the chair, a few comments around that first to set a little bit of context. You would have, through the Policy and Strategy Committee, received quite a comprehensive sort of report on all matters climate change, which touched on the Finance and Expenditures report to get in a little bit of context of what's happening across a broader range. The second thing I need to say is that I'm subject to a non-disclosure agreement, so I'm working with officials at a national level on what climate adaptation framework might look like into the future. And that in many ways connects back to the recommendations that come out of this report. So I'm a little bit hamstrung in terms of what I can openly talk about. But just from the context of the risk exacerbator and the beneficiary payment, it's really looking at systems that sheet home the costs to those who either create the problem or who benefit from the problem. So what that is a signal is, in order to make this approach affordable, that a greater emphasis will come out of directing the costs to those who are driving the need for those costs. And that is, again, a little bit of a back to the future sort of mark. If we go back a number of years, there's a very strong emphasis on trying to sheet the costs there that sort of somewhat got diluted. And again, it's coming back in the rhetoric that we need to be thinking quite clearly around how we sheet the costs home to those who are driving the costs. Whether they're causing the risk or they're receiving the benefits, they're in the same camp. And I think that's where the committee's report was taking us to think about, for this whole thing to be affordable, we can't expect it to be centrally funded or general rate funded. All of the things are going to have to happen. This stuff has to go and actually sit alongside those who are driving the costs. And I think that's the signal, and I think I'm pretty safe in saying that without sort of revealing a little bit more about what's in train.
So is the implication then that where it says, and I totally respect your NDA, where it talks about potentially impacting future financing in Tasman, is that kind of implying that we need to be very careful about decisions that we make that might actually cause impacts on others, or?
I think that's a signal around that, yes, this work is likely to come at increased costs, and we need to be careful about where we expect those costs to be met. Because as this framework takes shape, I think greater direction will come as to how we're expected to fund the increased services that are going to sit around this.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just, I want to go back to page 6 actually. I'm just curious about the comments regarding the new resource management system and the comments at 4.10.4 and 5, where they're looking at using greater use of national standards to reduce the need for resource consents, but expecting more compliance monitoring and enforcement. Now, from what I understand, a lot of our costs are recovered through that resourcing consent process, and with the conversation about, you know, those that are using are paying, has our mind gone to how, I mean, if we're in the position of enforcing something, how we charge that back? Because my concern is that becomes a cost to ratepayers. It's shifting the cost from those that are using the service to ratepayers having to do all that compliance monitoring and enforcement. So I'm just flagging that's a concern for me. Is there any comment on that?
Through the chair, so as things sit at the moment, the broader regulatory functions, so the compliance and enforcement and how we go about achieving compliance, it's got many threads to that equation, of course, and the consenting function are both provided by this council at with an expectation that 50% of the costs of that service are drawn from those who are either getting a consent or are having their level of compliance assessed, and 50% comes in from your general rate paying pool. So that's broadly the line in the sand that you've got. You've got a different line in the sand in relation to building, for instance, where you're expecting 87.5% of the cost to come in from the those who are getting the service. And again, in dogs control, you've got a 95% expectation that those registration fees cover the cost of the service. So these things are set at different levels. I think what this signal from the government is that we need to be open to moving more of the 50-50 split into the beneficiary pays category. And in line with the suggestions that I'm making in response to the Solicitor General guidelines, that the guidelines that we are now working on is anticipating more of that, certainly in the compliance space, more of that cost being shifted to those who are being assessed for compliance, as opposed to generating those funds, you know, in the current way that we do. So that is, I think, there's a moving game going on here that we need to make sure we stay in tune with where the government's taking us, and shifting, you know, our arrangements to be in keeping with that. So it's very much uppermost in our minds that is a trend that we need to respond to. And I think where Councillor was asking for about the climate change aspects, it's going in the same direction. The only aspect about this which is not yet founded is that, in fact, the national direction will be sufficient to remove the need for consenting functions, or reduce the need for consenting functions. I think that we need to be very careful not to jump to that as an outcome, because we've got to get there. And at the moment, you know, I think the reality is that the pressure on our consenting system is far, far greater than we could ever have imagined when it was set up. So a lot of decisions are made at the consenting level because, you know, our plan needs to be, you know, updated, and a lot of the pressure goes into the consent. So I don't see anytime soon that situation reversing. And indeed, if the government sees that as a reversing situation, I suspect it'll take quite some time for it to play out. So I'm not immediately thinking that we need to be downsizing our consent function, for instance. Well, if you read it in a black and white letter of the law, you think you might do that now, but I think that is a long way out. If in fact we ever, it's a bit of a, you know, desired state. Yeah.
Councillor Maru and then Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the report. And it was a shame it wasn't another 10 seconds later. So I just wanted to acknowledge Matt and your team for the dangerous building notice that was resolved in Motueka. So we certainly don't want a third fire there. So thank you for taken out. It would have been so much better if your phone had a run while we were talking. The other bit is back to you, Kim, in terms of I'm excited to see where we go with the VADE model and the new enforcement process. And I guess I'd just sort of urge in terms of as you work through that and it gets workshopped, I quite like the public interest test that was in the Waikato model, whether that comes through. And also the talks around triaging and how that might happen. And I guess the final one is just a discussion around anonymous complainants. So the key aspects of natural justice is often what are you deemed to have done and who has said you've deemed to have done that. And I think in looking at the noise ones as we go through is it's probably assumed who's made that complaint. And I did that for a number of years, responding to them and going, I think it's almost fair these days that if you do make a complaint, it is discoverable. I just but interested to have that, interested to see where we go with that new process. But yeah, just some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deakin.
Thank you, through the chair. Councillor Murray pretty much covered what I was going to say, which is 6.8, which is the triage system. Happy to see it's in there. And, Motueka Community Board have been talking about these sort of issues for a while. And there's often a feeling that this stuff gets lost in the machine, but it's actually still happening and it's in there today. So great to see, providing a bit of clarity for transparency for the community and judging, dealing with that political influence where we all want to say, can't you just not do this? Can't you just turn a blind eye? So having a system that is really clear and transparent and that is worked together and the community can see will be a good step, and it's going to make us a lot more efficient in dealing with these, and I think everyone is going to be beneficial across the board. So very happy again to see that in there.
Are you okay to second? Anything else? Okay, we're receiving the report and retrospectively approving the submission on natural hazards. So I'll put the resolution, the recommendation up. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Which moves us to Shane, Regulatory Manager report. Welcome.
Morning, Madam Chair. Morning, councillors. With regards to the second report that I've submitted now, I take it as been read. And I've also got some additional staff members that will assist me with any questions that may come out of the report. Some key points that has come out of this report, first and foremost, is the contract that we had with Controlled Services to deliver our regulatory services that they did not renew as of the 30th of September. With that news, we implemented a enforcement plan to continue delivering the services. And the first phase of that plan was to look at the existing staff that could fill some of the gaps that was created. We've had some experienced staff that could do animal control functions, also parking enforcement, and staff willing to go on call-out basis so the service delivery could be maintained. We also had to source vehicles and equipment as our contractor had left, and most of the stuff belonged to them. So it was a bit of running around to get that. There's been a great help from within council to get things moving, to put things in place, and we sourced 2 vehicles at the time. Part of that also, we recruited some fixed-term staff when we were able to do that. Once we were up and running and knew what we wanted, we employed 4 fixed-term staff to assist with carrying on the animal control function and parking, etc., and freedom camping. And we also seconded one of our internal staff to assist with doing the work. It's good to say that also some of the back office staff have stepped up to help, and with regards to admin functions and making sure that the registrations for dogs, license, and that was still continuing. We've now moved into the second phase, where we're looking to recruit more staff to assist with this function. The second phase being the focus on parking and on freedom camping that will come into effect over the summer period and create more demand on resources. Looking to employ another 3 staff there in the period, and then also we need additional vehicles to maintain that level of service that we can do over the summer period. Come April, May, then we will reassess what we've been doing as by bringing this in-house versus what the contractor delivered, and we'll make an assessment on what the future will look like so that it can be implemented on the 1st of July 2005. So that's planned with regards to the controlled services contract that terminated. The other key point that probably came out of the report, I started reporting on abuse of staff that was underreported previously, and it's just highlighting that we are working in a changing environment. People are starting to become more aggressive towards compliance staff, especially parking and dog control staff. So just signaling that, and we do have body-worn cameras that help to some measure. We're also encouraging staff to report these matters to internally and also to the police where needed, especially where it's physical or threatening, that we do show a zero tolerance of any abuse towards our staff and that they are supported. And yeah, we will probably look at also looking at what technology assistance we can help our staff better in the field. So those were the things, key points coming out of that, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Shane. I have had somebody in the community in Takaka say to me, how can we have parking wardens come over when there's just loads of spare parks along the street nearly every day other than a couple of weeks and, well, maybe 3 weeks over Christmas. And why do we have enforcement people coming in, well, wardens coming in, when there's not a parking issue really? I guess that would come under our triaging sort of approach, perhaps, when we're considering that.
Madam Chair, yes, it's not only about the parking spaces, we also have unregistered vehicles.
Yeah.
And we also, the staff going over there, they are carrying different functions. They will do dog control enforcement, and if there's freedom camping matters that need to be addressed, abandoned vehicles, etc. And then, yes, as a part of the duties is just to have parking enforcement also where it's warranted. But yeah, coming into that, it's other parts of parking enforcement like the unwarranted vehicles, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnamonth. Oh, no, Councillor Kinnamonth and Councillor Maru.
Thank you, through the chair. The staff that you're bringing on board, are they within existing budgets? You're bringing people on, so do you have to increase your budget?
Through the chair, at the moment, no, we had a budget for the contract, and we are working within that budget at the moment.
Councillor Maru. Oh,
Through the chair, just building on that one, that is something that we've got to pay very close attention to, and that's hence why Shane's talked about 3 phases. So phase 1 clearly is within budget. Phase 2 is a matter that before we get the approval to appoint anyone, the executive leadership team has oversight of the base case. Phase 3 is a matter where by then we'll know precisely the nature of the staffing requirements, resources they need, and the cost of the service. So that will flow into an annual plan discussion, which council will be part of. So conscious that we had a contract budget, conscious that it's desirable to fit the service within that, but there are different considerations when you're doing something in-house versus a historical contracted situation. So phase 1, definitely. Phase 2, ELT, I'm ensuring, got oversight of that. Phase 3, a discussion.
Perfect. I also understand as well that you mentioned July. you come up with, so there'll be stage 3 in July coming back with more money for staff. Okay, good.
Thank you. Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through, I just wanted to highlight more than anything, because I know that the fantastic work that the licensing inspectors do, and I know you're one down, and I don't want that to get lost in terms of all the other complications of your world that you're actively just resize that job and re-recruiting. So I absolutely encourage you to bolster that team back up. I don't want it to get lost, and I don't want it to be one of those ones that are white, because as you can see in the report, the number of licenses that are issued are up this year. So the team's doing a fantastic job with one down, essentially.
Thank you, Councillor. And if I could just expand on that, it's a role that we had difficulty trying to fill, and we've repurposed that role to better align to our business needs.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. I'm just looking at the table on dogs and the number of dogs unregistered as at 30th of September, which looks to be about 3 times what it was for the same period in the previous year. So I guess I don't know whether the 2023 result was in itself an aberration from previous years. So if we had more data, so we could see more of a trend, that might be helpful. But if in actual fact the 2024 year is the aberration with 649, I mean, I'm just thinking about the massive load on your staff of having to follow up with all of those dog owners. I mean, is the 2024 data the aberration here? And what do we make of it?
Through the Chair. This is an anomaly that we experienced in the last 6 months. And what had happened, we had a lot of staff turnover. One, we had a officer that dealt specifically with getting those paperwork out and everything. That officer has been promoted to a team leader, and we were getting a whole lot of new staff coming in. And that had just complicated us getting the information out. Coupled with that, we also had a change to our internal computer software system that we were working through, and required or necessitated another report to be drafted so that we could capture everything. So it was just the timing. We currently working hard to catch up on the backlog, and we're hoping to have that all done shortly.
Okay, so I shouldn't get too excited about it then.
Maybe not. There'll be other things to get excited about, I think.
Thank you.
Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Shilkers.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just comment on a couple of questions. Councillor Mackenzie's already asked one of them. It's appalling to hear our staff are not being treated well. They are just trying to get a job done. But I would like to note that there have been businesses in Richmond in particular that have actually supported our staff in the field. So I'm really grateful to those businesses for that, and appreciate that that's been done, because we don't want to see our staff being treated badly. Just a couple of very quick questions. I note the change in the fine for parking in disabled spaces. Have we issued any parking tickets? I appreciate that in Richmond, for example, some of the most used disability parking places are not on council land, but have we issued any tickets at that new rate? And the other question was regarding the homelessness. Are we seeing issues from those people that find themselves in that unfortunate space of not having a home? Are they causing issues in the community, or are they just quietly getting on with their day-to-day lives?
Through the Chair, I can confirm we have issued tickets to people park in mobility parks. I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know of 2 that was issued by our staff. Might be more, and I'm sure Shannon will look that up. With regards to the homeless people, yes, we haven't experienced incidents of much abuse on our staff in that instance. We are working with them, and in my report, I've made mention that we do refer them to MSD. Where we do encounter one or two that may be abusive, we notify our other workers in the field, i.e. the Piki Oranga, who have nurses in the field, and then they are aware of it. So I do have regular catch-ups with them now. And where we find some of the homeless people around known areas, then we do encourage them to also move on if they become if it becomes an antisocial behavior. Most are compliant, they will go. There are incidents, however, where we do have to involve the police just to assist with helping us.
It has been raised in the past, isn't it, here about us moving people on who are homeless, but we are identifying where people are homeless and making those connections where we're able to social services. Yeah. Councillor Shellcrest.
Yeah, through the chair. Just mine's on the noise complaints, mainly the music party one. Just rough. Are they multiple offenders in the same dwellings? Is there lots of those, or is it? Would they be all separate? I mean, just roughly. And has there been fines given, for multiple noise complaints? Is that a common thing?
Through the chair, I'll ask Environmental Health Officer Tracy to answer the question.
Good morning. Through the chair, we have a number of sort of recidivist offenders in the noise complaint party noise field, and there's a staged response follow up with those. Some of those will we start with letters. With if there's seizures at those places, then we assess when they ask for return of their stereos. We ask how likely it is. We determine how likely it is that they're going to be repeat offenders, and then determine whether stereos are returned. For example, if there's if the capacity is there, then we will issue infringement notices. There's some sort of strict guidelines in doing that, and in some cases we will place abatement notices on those properties. And the effect of that is that if there are further complaints, then we can go straight to seizure rather than a warning, excessive noise direction. The vast majority are single incidents.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. Anything further with Shane's report? Certainly strongly support a zero tolerance approach to abuse of staff. It's just unacceptable, and I appreciate that's the approach you are taking. Yeah. Was there a mover of the report? Councillor Maru moving and Councillor Ellis seconding. There's nothing further. Thank you, and I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Which moves us to the Harbourmaster report, and I think Peter's online on Zoom, I think.
Good
morning. Good. Over to you.
Good morning,
Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just, I guess, cut straight to it. Take the report as read, but I'd also like to provide a little bit of an update on a few of the matters, I guess, that have been happening last week and this week, just to provide you with some detail, I suppose. So last week, I was invited to a Department of Conservation concession holders meeting. So that had all the operators, and I gave about a 30-minute talk on a few of the things we're doing this summer. Obviously, a few of the things they're not too happy with the bylaw, but also a few things that they can see some progress, and hopefully sort of opens the door to working with them more in depth in the future. And then the following day, I held a Able Tasman user group meeting with the same operators, essentially, to facilitate sort of more of a group discussion around a health and safety sort of format for the park. So that's a sort of forum that or initiative that I've sort of set up for the operators to work collaboratively, and I think that's hopefully well received, and we'll see how that goes in the future. This is to replace the sort of old CDO licensing meetings that were used to be held, rather than doubling up with docs meetings, try and separate it out in a more useful format for the operators. And then moving to this week, obviously we had a plane incident in our region, in regional waters. We were, or the Harbourmaster's office were tasked by RCC NZ to assist, and we did do so. We didn't actually get to the plane before the helicopter did. However, we probably would have been first on scene had there been more of a delay. Pretty good response from everybody in the district and outside the district to get the response needed, and a pretty good result. The pilot is safely on shore. I can't provide any updates on what actually happened, as it will be a pending investigation, and we're still working through the process of what will happen next in regards to the plane. At the moment, it's a strong likelihood it will be recovered, and there will more than likely want to be an investigation around that. However, I can't talk on the specifics on what will be happening yet. It will be job number one for me next week on figuring out what the next plan is with that. What I can say is there's no concerns for environmental impact from any sort of spillage from the plane. We've sort of discussed this, and we're not concerned of any impact, and we've got no reports of any debris. So it is thought that it is all intact at this stage. That's pretty much my updates. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you. And so, are you saying that the fuel that might be on board isn't a risk?
So we're not. We've not got a definitive figure on how much fuel was remaining on board when it crash landed. But from what we know of aviation fuel, it's so light a fuel that it evaporates quicker than we could recover it anyway. And the procedure really for dealing with it is actually to keep all vessels clear, as it is highly flammable. So there's no way of really recovering that fuel safely anyway. And the thoughts are that those planes don't carry a lot of fuel, and he was nearing the end of his journey. So we're not concerned about the volume either.
And in terms of there not being any evidence yet or sighting of debris coming up off the wreck, I just don't imagine there's somebody in that area very often to see if that's if there's a shift there. Would somebody see it? The tree falls in the forest, sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. It is a wee way out to sea, so there's not going to be too many vessels there. And I've also put a navigation safety notice out yesterday, informing all of the fishing fleet if they're doing any bottom trawling in that area to avoid that position and to give it a wide berth until we can assess exactly the position that the plane is in and what condition it's in.
And is that happening reasonably quickly? Assessing?
We don't have the capabilities to do that. So at the moment, it's a case of waiting to see whether CAA or RCC New Zealand or any insurers will be coming forward to help with that. But our vessel doesn't have the capabilities to locate that wreck anyway.
I just hope it's not too much of a wait and see from those parties. Got a plane on the seabed and they might find out where it is exactly and something might happen or at some point. Anywho.
It will be high on my priority next week to crack down. At this stage, we're still waiting for news of the pilot, so I don't want to be the person sort of gathering to find out how he's doing and wanting all the insurance details, if you know what I mean. So I'll be following it up next week.
Yeah, my flip criticism wasn't so much of you and our service there, but CAA and whoever else is going to, be taking a lead in that process. Thank you. Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you. Through the chair. Good to see Movember. Secondly, which boat did you use to go out to this incident?
Sentinel, we responded. Yeah.
And also, I've had discussions with you in the past about Coast Guard attending these incidents as well. I read somewhere or other that they were there as well as yourself. Is that true or not?
Yep. So Coast Guard got the call out first, and then so this tasking came from RCC New Zealand rather than from the search and rescue or the SARS police team. So RCC contacted Coast Guard directly, and myself and Paul received information that they'd been tasked, and that was our first sort of sign there was something happening within the region. And then we called the police SARS, and they put us through, an RCC tasked us then directly. So slight delay in tasking. We weren't aware, or we didn't respond until Coast Guard were already on the water, as were Nelson Harbourmaster team already on the water as well. Obviously, we're a lot closer and in a lot more sheltered conditions. So we, all the team, I wasn't on board, but the team made up quite a lot of time and would have been ahead of the others. But no, the response was pretty good by all agencies.
So, because you were called out by the police, do they cover some of your charges?
So generally speaking, with any taskings, the costs are recoverable, yes. We're not sure at this stage whether that will come from police, SARS or RCC, or even ACC, but yeah, the costs are normally recoverable for these call-outs.
And two other little questions through the chair. Congratulations on getting some new summer staff. Long overdue, and may this summer be a bit less hectic than other summers. And then my last question was, when you launched the new boat, I'll start again. Do you have a system for recording injuries on your boats? I'm thinking of Councillor Walker had an injury at the when the new boat was launched, and she was had to seek medical treatment.
I think Kim's gonna have a little comment there. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll just take that one, Councillor. So all injuries associated with anything to do with either work that's carried out by staff, councillors and contractors is recorded on a council-wide system. So the injury to Councillor Walker is certainly been captured and mitigations put in place around it.
Thank you. Councillor Maru.
Okay.
Oh, you've crossed your name out. Come up, you better come up.
I'll come up with a quick question. It's a great report, Pete. So in terms of the CapEx and the staffing within budget?
Yep.
I just had to make that question up because I got put on the spot. Thank you. I'm happy to move the receipt of the Harbourmaster's report.
Thank you. Somebody have it a second? Thank you, Councillor Dakey. Anything further? Okay, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to on the run sheet. We've got annual air quality report.
Diana's up online.
Diana's online. I've been looking for you in the gallery. There you are up there. Welcome, Diana. Can you hear me? We might we could just have our quick cup of tea break while we line up, Diana. Let's break a quick 10 minutes, back at 22. Thank you. Report. and some other folk with you too. You might introduce us all. Thank you.
Oh, good morning. I'm Kathy Richardson, Compliance Officer here.
Hi, I'm Anna McKenzie, Visual Scientist.
Kia ora koutou. So yeah, I'm Diana Worthy, Team Leader, Natural Resources Policy. Apologies for the confusion just before morning tea. I am here now. So this is the team that's put together the annual air quality report. So that is actual Appendix 1 of the cover report, which I prepared. We don't have anything further to add at this time, but more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. An actual approach of actually taking the report as read, isn't it? Councillor Dakin.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Nice, thorough report. Just sort of shows where we're at. Maybe the 5.1.2, it says the Richmond airshed has the 5th highest monitoring location for the number of days in exceedance, but PM 2.5. Trying to get my head around that, because it doesn't feel necessarily like that's true. However, obviously the data shows it is. The factors causing that, do you have a handle on, is it a combination of rural burns, fireplaces, or is there something that I sort of miss here to see where the pollution comes from? Because, I wonder about pollen. There's things like pollen, does that show up here? So do you have for that exceedance being quite high on a New Zealand level, do you have a reason or behind that?
Through the chair. So in terms of the two particulate matter that we monitor, so we have the PM10, which is the national regulation, and then we have the PM 2.5. So PM10 is a combination of natural sources, so that will be your pollen, your sea salt, I think sulphur as well, Anna, in addition to those smoky sources, which is the predominant source is home heating within the Richmond airshed. Previously, we have done some studies that has looked at, the contribution of what might be happening out on the Waimea Plains, but certainly the number of outdoor rural burns, I think, it's fair to say, had decreased in the last few years, and I think that has been a contributor as to why we haven't been having any exceedances over that last 3 years. So in terms of PM 2.5, that's simply your anthropogenic sources, so it's those human sources, and the bulk of that will be the home heating contribution.
Yeah, so it's either everyone else is doing very well, or we've got a little bit of work to do. Should we move to that standard and want to achieve a better rating? Would you say that we've got a sort of a few remaining offending fireplaces that are sort of still not getting the message on how to use their fire? Or is it that we've got non-compliant fires being used that shouldn't? Are either of those two things current?
Yeah, that's a tough one. We obviously investigate any complaints that come through in relation to those points. As you can see from the report, we've got some stats there about what non-compliant wood burners are out there, and we do provide education, send out a letter to try and get some information back. And I also do a proactive patrol in winter, and I like to go out at least 3 nights, and I was able to do 1 this year. I was a little bit busy with something else ongoing, and there was no non-compliance other than certificate hadn't been done for the wood burner, but it was compliant. And we're obviously investigating the complaints and follow up. But
I'll get you to bring the mic closer to you, please. Right up, a bit closer. Yeah, thank you. You're just fading away a little bit there.
Here we go. How's that? So that's
okay. Thank you. That answers it. Yeah. So, because sometimes the feeling is that it's a few offenders who are making 90% of the smoke, and seeing that there is actually active
patrolling
is good to know, and education behind that as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Mayling. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Mayling.
Just quickly, Graham, we go back in history, this is actually an improvement because you used to exceed the 10. If I remember back 10 years ago, it used to be considerably worse than it is now. So does that mean that gradually we're getting rid of these older non-compliant wood burners?
Through the chair, so in terms of the planning framework, there are several mechanisms. The last time council did a plan change around air quality was in 2007. And at that time, we had what's called a point of sale rule. So if you didn't have a clean burning wood burner, and then the property was sold, the requirement was there if someone did want to use the fire, they had to upgrade it to an MFE approved one. So that's kind of still ticking along in the background. In addition to that, if you had a existing authorised wood burner, you're welcome to upgrade it to one of these, low emission type burners. And then the third part is if you are a new house since 2007, the current rule framework says that you can only put in a pellet fire. So it's kind of different approaches in terms of the rules, but also very much sitting alongside that is our non-reg programs in terms of education, advice, and things like that, and also the funding that council has given to warmer, healthier homes in relation to insulation, that wider kind of package of work around making sure that, you've got a healthy home. All of those messages help.
If I may follow up, but there are newer burners now that we haven't approved that have super low emissions as well, aren't there, other than just pellet fires?
Through the chair, that's right. So the rule framework is outdated in relation to new houses who might want to put in a wood burner. Currently, you can only do a pellet fire, but we know that the technology improvements, ultra lows, are also just as well up there. We have this issue and we have discussed this previously with councillors through a workshop around the air quality rules, is that the technology has improved, so we could relax that rule and enable more households, new dwellings to put in ultra lows. But cumulatively, thinking about this PM 2.5 and how, we've got a lot of exceedances under that guideline, and we know that government is signalling that we will be moving towards monitoring and management of PM 2.5. You could relax it now under PM 10 framework, but at some point in the future, our regulation and management options will have to become more stringent to bring those numbers down. So this is why staff are recommending, and it has been previously supported by council, that we just wait and see what's happening around the regulations before we actually move on the discharge to air plan change. So it makes sure that we actually, understand the technology, understand the science, and also following the regulations as best we can.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Discharge to air plan change time frame remotely.
So through the chair, we have signalled that we want to wait to see what happens through RMA reform and our understanding of PM 2.5 and what requirements we'll have there before we would move on it. So,
which could take us out to.
So we expect next year have further information around that phase 3 RM reform, which is what the air topic will be covered under. So I'd say it's probably a good 18 months away before we really see what's happening in the RM reform space.
Councillor Shellcrest.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Burning of coal, is that something you feel like you've got your finger on the pulse on? I know there's a lot of businesses still in the Tasman area using coal as their main source of fuel for their operations. Is that something that you feel like you've got your finger on? And I know I have heard that there was some money available through central government to help some of these businesses to change the way they operate their business? Is that something that we're still doing proactively?
Through the chair, in terms of coal use, I think it's fair to say within our district, in terms of industrial stuff, it's with the glass houses and their boilers. So back last year, a NPS and NES for industrial process heat came into effect, and so that's looking at regulating and reducing emissions in relation to coal. So those national standards there are regulating that. So where it was primarily affected is in relation to the TRMP may allow for permitted activity coal boilers, and as I say, that's primarily used for glass houses. And depending on, I suppose, the volume of their emissions, come end of January, they will be required to put in a resource consent to regulate the use of that. And over time, government's intention is that the use of coal in industrial process heat will be reduced.
Yeah, there's just one. There's a business that I use to recycle our polystyrene, and doing the right thing, recycling polystyrene. And then you look out, and it's like there's a big black plume of smoke coming out of the coal furnace that heats up, obviously, their machinery. So it was just one of those sort of, you're doing double-edged sword, right? So, but it'll be great to see those businesses supported, I suppose, because they're doing a good thing, but then they're also doing a bad thing, just the way they operate their business. So yeah, thanks for that.
Some cultures call that talking out of both sides of your face. I understand. I get told that at home. Fonterra, of course, in Golden Bay use coal. Yeah. So in terms of, when you're mentioning it's glass houses and that system primarily. So, and I'm not sure about what other Fonterra plants are doing, but I know they've got a program. It's a few years away to replace that. And I think there's a bit of pressure going on Fonterra nationally, maybe to shorten up those timeframes. Councillor Kinnemont and then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Through the chair, staff have already answered questions for another.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through your chair. Thanks for the report, Diana. In trolling through it, so it may be in there and I've missed it. What part does vehicle emissions play in the P2.5 P10? Because I've seen there's some talk about black carbon and nitrogen oxide, but what part does traffic pollution play in that? And I suppose follow on from that, if it does play a part, what are the implications if the Hope bypass ever happens?
Through the chair, so yeah, in terms of human sources, traffic is obviously one of those, so it's captured under both PM10 and PM2.5. Through next year's work program, we're looking to monitor NO2, and so a key source of NO2 is your diesel emissions. So we'll be able to do that for Richmond and Motueka to get a sense of what's happening in that space.
Further questions, sorry. I suddenly thought, do we have any data on the effects close to roads in our region?
Through the chair, so NZTA has a monitoring site, I think it's on the Richmond deviation, and I think they also do some monitoring in Motueka on the high street there too. And so we can access those records, that's all publicly available. In addition, I also say that we do what's called source apportionment studies for Richmond. So this is analysing all the filters that we collect daily, and we do it over a year, and then GNS then analyses it, and so they can work out from the filter samples approximately percentages of different contributions. So vehicle is captured in that, and certainly we can pass you on that study if you want to have a look at what the percentages are. I can't recall off the top of my head, sorry.
Yeah, I'd be interested, perhaps not in the study, but in what the actual impact of that vehicle emission is. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything further? Someone happy to move the report? Councillor Mayling, second Councillor Ellis. Thank you very much. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Which moves us to David, Rivers Coastal Structures Report. Welcome. You've survived your venture over the hill. Let's see.
I did. Thank you. I not unscathed, but still in one piece.
River care meetings in Mohua happened. Is he? Yeah.
So through the chair, I will, of course, take the report as read, but just a couple of highlights. The calm weather is more or less continuing, but we have had a few sort of smaller rain events, but although small in the grand scheme of kind of flooding, they still managed to cause quite a bit of damage. For managing that, nothing too serious at this point, mostly up in the upper Motueka as typical. Other good highlights, the river care meetings have returned, and we've just started them this week. We were over in Golden Bay on Monday, up in Collingwood and Takaka for 2 meetings, and we have 2 more next week in Motueka and the Dove, and then 2 more the following week covering the upper Motueka area and the Waimea catchments. I think all relevant councillors have been circulated on appointments and in meetings agendas. So other fun things, it's actually point number 1.3 here towards the end. We have the Office of the Auditor General in town this week. They're just over in the Wangapeka room as we speak, talking to a whole bunch of folks about our flood protection infrastructure. So they've decided this year to do a performance review on infrastructure resilience, and in particular flood protection resilience. And ourselves and Waikato Regional Council drew the short straws for being the subject of that audit.
So purely lotto, just
not quite. So they were looking at contrasting councils. So they wanted a sort of a large, well-resourced sort of North Island Council, Waikato, without obviously targeting all the people who are still reeling from Cyclone Gabrielle and cleaning up. And they also wanted to look at a smaller unitary council, and there's not that many of them in the country. And so knock off Gisborne because they've got their work cut out for them. Nelson City, they had just done a performance review on climate change for them, I think last year. So they're like, okay. And apparently Marlborough was no. And when pressed, I said there were reasons. So I don't know why, but we're basically last man standing. But there were some other positive reasons in that we're a bit of an anomaly in the past few years. We've actually managed to spend quite a bit on flood protection infrastructure because we've benefited from these government projects. And they were just curious how, a smaller unitary council handles this kind of thing. So it's been quite good so far, and we're quite positive and optimistic in that, regardless of what the review finds, and I'm looking to be quite open and honest and get all the skeletons out of the closet, is it'll be quite useful for us as a sort of a roadmap forward. Always lots of fun stuff happening in the rivers and coastal space, but I will leave it to you if you have any questions on the rest of the report.
thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you through the chair. I'm not sure whether you read my email. Yeah, okay. So I just emailed David this morning because at the Dovedale meeting last night, I mentioned the River Care meeting coming up. But generally speaking, people looked at me with a blank face. So I think it just comes down to the hardy annual around communication, like how does the council communicate with the public? I mean, they're all genuinely interested and want to attend. I go, oh, it's a Newsline. So just maybe more local approaches through community Facebook pages. Or look, I'm not a communications expert, but
it was a discussion that I had with our comms teams, and so it did make it into Newsline. It's on our website, of course. Whoever takes a look at the website. It was circulated on our council Facebook page last week or the week before. It's a valid point though, because in particular we had wondered about Golden Bay, and I don't know if we actually ever did, but it might have ended up in the sort of the Golden Bay weekly. Not sure if Councillor Hill would know, but the folks in Takaka certainly knew about the meeting. And,
Yeah.
there's probably about 30 of them that arrived, but appreciate that we can do a bit more to put it out onto the actual local pages as well.
Yes, so most of those small communities, they have maybe a small community Facebook page, or the other thing is most of them also have their own monthly or whatever publications. So in the case of Dovedale, you've got the Dovedale News. Always tricky because there's cut-off dates and we might not know when they're going to be published, but it just seems to be a better way to actually reach the people. Anyway, that was just a comment, not a question. I do have 2 questions if I could. Thank you. So we talk about the LiDAR survey and then understanding gravel as a result of that. So the report talks about we're working through it to compare with previous years' surveys. So when will we as councillors maybe get some update on what that work is showing? Bearing in mind that, as we know, gravel is always a hot topic.
It is a hot topic. It was certainly the hot topic in Takaka as well. They seem to be probably the only thing that they wanted to talk about. But it's an interesting journey that we're on. We've, in the past couple of years, having switched to collecting LiDAR data, we then didn't have the data record to make it very useful. We have cross-sectional data going back a number of years, but the LiDAR data is challenging to directly compare to that. Now, where we're sitting now is having needed to process the last 2 or 3 years of data all as a set to get a good handle on actually where we're at now. So we keep talking about where's the data? We actually need a record of data to produce something useful. My immediate focus has been the Upper Motueka River, with a desire to have some number before I march in front of the crew at Tapawera, lest I don't actually make it out of that meeting alive. However, the data is only one part of it. And if you really dive into our consent, it's all about river management. It's about identifying where the gravel aggradation is causing river management issues. And that was the discussion I had with the community in Takaka on Monday. Is the consent establishes limits, but they're not a brick wall. We do our work to identify the potential impacts of exceeding those limits. For example, Takaka, for example, is not mentioned as or managed as a mean bed envelope river like the Upper Motueka is. It's very much a annual quota, and anything above that, you need to look in detail. So we're starting to actually look in detail and assess what the impacts are and assess what the benefits against the the need to actually manage the river management issues. So, and we're seeing some progress there. So trying to take the focus off of the data as driving the extraction, because it's a bit of cart before the horse. The data is very important for us to understand the impact that we're having, and it's a key limit on the consent, but it needs to be done in the context of solving a river management issue. Oh, more question.
Well, yes, I mean, I guess, so I get all that. And then when I look in the report, you can't help but being a bit taken by the photograph of the Upper Motueka River that you've put in the report, because, I mean, to be honest, I don't know anything about rivers, but you can look at that photo and you can see, wow, it's coming down and it's whacking into that bank, and then it's cutting across and whacking into the other bank, and we're talking about doing the rock wall bits, I guess, on those to stop the impact of it. And then for river management, you can't help but think, oh man, if it could just maybe cut through a little bit less of an angle, that would solve all the problems. Then you'd get rid of a bit of gravel and you'd stop that extreme bank to bank thing happening. But look,
well, that's an excellent point, Councillor. Matt, the picture that figure 2 shows the erosion most severely, and those 2 outside bends are the subject of some stabilization work. But later on, those 2 beaches most visibly, those are the areas that will be extracting 15,000 cubic meters of gravel from in tandem with that work to just take the pressure off of those bends. Because it's just every time it rains, it's gets further and further and further. And poor caravan there almost went for a ride in one of the latest rains.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, you're onto it. I just think that, doing the rock work, it costs money.
It does.
And so if in actual fact there are other ways of achieving good outcomes, then we should be open to those.
There are a lot of drawbacks of over extraction of gravel, but one of the largest ones is then spending more money on stabilizing the river. We spend a lot of money on stabilizing the river a lot anyways, and sometimes the aggradation of gravel can cause that problem as well. So it's keeping it all in context and not just relying on one single thing to be telling us what to do.
Rob.
Yeah, through the chair, if it's okay. So there's two things I'll mention. So one is after the technical reports are done by staff for the land and freshwater plan change next year, so that's by the end of March is the date, then the staff will be starting to focus on the gravel workshop. So council asked for a gravel workshop. So that'll be after March. So they're due end of March, I think, Diana. Between March and mid-year. So somewhere in there you'll get a workshop and that'll be led by David and Alistair and someone in policy, I hope. So that will talk about all of these mechanisms. And one of the biggest things we'll get them to focus on is when you're looking at river management, it's all about stream power and the ability for the river to move. Because you think steep rivers are like really fit people, they can run a long time and they run fast, and really shallow rivers are scrawny people like me and they walk slowly. They don't have much power. And when you look at a river with lots of S-bends in it, it's got a lot of power. So it has to, you're constantly trying to get it to lose its fitness, make it work by moving the gravel and essentially tiring itself out. So we don't want rivers to run fast straight. They're really dangerous. We want rivers to bend and wiggle and wander around because they lose all their energy, they get tired, and they're less dangerous to manage. So in that whole gravel management, rock management, David's got plates or juggling balls in the air at the moment, and it's a little bit of rock and it's a little bit of gravel and it's a little bit of sorry, you're going to lose some land, and it's a little bit of politics in there as well, which I guess is what river care meetings are all about. And I know, if I can indulge me 1 second, I'd just like to really thank the councillors for turning up to those meetings, because they're a really important part of how we engage with the community, and the community loves to engage on river stuff. So it's admirable that David's getting stuck into those. So yeah, thank you for the councillors for turning up on those.
And I see on the Tasman District Council Facebook page was a post on the 11th of November advertising the dates and places and times for the river care meetings throughout the district. And I imagine that that was reposted on the community pages. We can find out from Chris. That would be safe to assume, I think. And one of the things that can be not so straightforward to convey is the complexity of what's needed in terms of managing the river. And I know at home there's often the refrain is get the gravel out, just get the gravel out, and it's not always the right thing to do in every case. And I just found it very helpful when you were explaining about the use of groins, David, out of Collingwood. It was someone brought forward that actually those groins are bloody useless and they don't do anything. And look, it starts eating away there, then it's something, and then you explain actually that's how it's supposed to function. And when you see those signs, they are symptoms of actually that it's working in general. So I think the more that we can just keep going with the conveying the complexity, and I think the other thing too is for the group that were at Collingwood for the Aorere River, to have an email group for that group of people, and because where they are on the river is very specific to them and what they see happening there. And I've always advocated here that we've got people who've been on these rivers generationally for 100 years or something, and they certainly know the rivers. And I think the more that we are localizing our relationship with people, I thought you were very good at saying, right in, there's a specific place on the website that people can come around the river management issues that they have, and I guess our responsiveness to that will make clear if our walk is our talk.
One thing that became quite clear as well is that we just need to be out there talking to the people on the river much more than we are. And because of various reasons, floods and responsiveness and not enough people in the team, which I think has actually turned around and we're in a much better position now, just to spend the time out there building those relationships, and we'll be in a much better place.
Yes, and once we get some big storm events, that certainly takes the focus and the resource away from other things, isn't it? Councillor Butler, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I just following on from the conversation, I would just like to just say that David and Shane were an amazing team at the Tākaka meeting, because it was pretty touch and go, and the issue of the gravel is such a hot topic that the word got round all the farmers that they needed to go to the meeting, and they certainly were there in force. But I think it was interesting that when you made a commitment to actually look at the river on the ground, I think that was a very big thing for the farmers. And I just wanted to say that, do you feel this is a realistic thing to actually travel the river in the way that you indicated that you would try and do? I mean, I got the impression that you felt that you could actually do it. And of course, it's going to be very beneficial because you can see the heights of the beaches rather than just looking down from the top, which is where the balance between real life and the data comes in. But so my first question is, do you feel that you've now got the resources, and is it going to be possible to actually travel the river and look at the sites? And the second question is just about the groins, because I've had, I just remember responses in the past from the river biodiversity scientists saying that groins are actually more beneficial for species, maybe than a straight rock wall. So that's just two questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. The first question, yes, I absolutely think we have the resources to do what we say, look at the beaches. It's a matter of prioritizing that level of work and understanding that those relationships and that on the ground observations are hugely important, not only for our understanding of the work, but for building that level of trust with the people on the ground, the ratepayers. And that's something that we'll be prioritizing starting now-ish, basically. It may not be a sort of top to bottom sequential thing. I think we'll actually try to reach out to the people that indicated interest and go look at their sites and have those discussions and train them in a way to see, what are we looking for here? When does it become a river management issue that we're interested in going out and addressing? And there'll be a priority list. And I think they really did understand at a certain point that no, we're not just going to go in and dredge the whole thing, next year. And there's a progression that we need to go through. But the more we're on the ground talking to them, the more that will make sense. And that's sorry, second question. I remember you asked a second question about the groins. It's yes, they provide a lot more diversity of habitat. Like at the Edoriri meeting, we were talking about, well, there's a little scour hole that forms at the very end of the groins, and the rocks kind of fall in, and that's kind of the point. That's one of the benefits, is this lovely deep pool habitat around the end, and some quiet water in between the groins. And it also doesn't completely cover the bank in rock, so you can still plant a lot of vegetation along the bank to provide that shading and that input of organic material into the river. They are not quite as robust as is just a straight wall of rock. So there are some situations where we'd still just use the straight wall of rock, but they're good 90% of the time for the situations that we need, and they're cheaper.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. And what about cost? Are they more expensive to install? Or?
No, they tend to use a little bit less rock than a straight rock wall, so they do tend to be a bit more cost effective.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Thanks very much. And thank you once again for such a great job in Taka. And I do encourage councillors to go to the meetings. You know, they really are, that just gives you a window on the world of rivers. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Butler. Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'll just defend David with his river walks. I spent probably half a day with David, and I can't think of his name, with also one of our ratepayers who has lived beside the Motueka River all his life. On page 63, you can see the shingle build up at the Peach Island, and that was one of the areas that we visited. And as you can see now, there is shingle extraction happening there, which I'm very pleased to see. David indicated that it should happen, and it is. So certainly made that trip worthwhile as far as I'm concerned now. And that's it. So the other thing is talking about the groin. I watched with interest on the Waimea Bridge on this side, on the upstream. About 4 or 5 years ago, there were 5 or 6 small rock groins put in on the bank. If you those going over the bridge on the way home today, if you look left, you'll now see that the shingle is built up to the bank and probably about 20 metres out into the riverbed. And that's because those rock groins are put in. That's the way it's captured the shingle at that particular point. And I'm really impressed with how that happened. And because that river was hard in against that bank at that stage, and I was always worried about this end of the bridge. And it was just a simple fix. Mother Nature done the rest after those groins are put in. And it's interesting, you know, I agree with Rob too about a meandering river takes the power out of the water. Unfortunately, Mother Nature doesn't really care about that when she gives us stuff. The bank, there was no meandering, and it was full on. I watched a tree come down there as I was driving across the bridge, and I just about say it years ago in Grammy, I thought I stood on the flood wall down there, and cars were driving down the street at 50k, and a tree passed them in the river. That's how quick the river was flowing. So when that water's going, it's going. So, you know, you can meander the rivers as much. And the worst part about it is you get it all going really good how we want it. And a flood like that just kills everything. And you've got to start again if she doesn't leave it behind like it used to be. So, yeah, no, thank you, David, for that walk around. And I'll just convey it to the rest of the councillors. I really enjoyed it, and seeing some work being done for the result of that now, I'm really happy. Thank you. And I'll see you at the River Care meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Shawcross.
Yeah, it's just looking at the fly tipping. I was actually biking down the river the other day on the cycle track there, and saw, I think it was this spot actually. Is it worth putting something in Newsline about this? And you know, I'm presuming there's fines applicable to these sort of activities. Just letting people know, and we obviously don't want people, you know, there's lots of people down those rivers. You know, I'm sure people get seen doing this sort of thing. I just wonder whether, because it's a lot of money that's just coming out of our obviously rates. So that's more just, is that a thing that we should be looking to do to try to sort of mitigate these activities, as disgusting as they are?
Absolutely. It's a perennial frustration. We have put it up on Facebook a number of times over the years as a sort of shame anyways, not necessarily name. There are a few hot spots, I suppose. One of them used to be up in Takaka. I don't remember the specific name of the road, just in and out down to a beach by the wastewater treatment plant. And we set up security cameras there, and it's been very effective because people have one way in, one way out. They go in full, they come out empty. It's pretty clear, hit with fines, and it's dropped off quite a bit. Waimea is a bit more challenging because it's a bit of a route. So we're looking at measures there with surveillance, and we've had some recent really good catches that we're going to be pushing through to fines, and hopefully that will help curb it. But it's such a, I mean, I just drove through there this morning with the auditors and there was fresh fly tipping always. So it's just a constant battle.
Yeah, I think in that river management plan, I think this was talked about having some more key access points to try to, like I say, mitigate that. No, thanks.
Thank you. Anything further? Yes, Councillor Ellis and Councillor Kinamont.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be quick. Thank you so much for the report. I always love the discussion because I learn so much from your guys' passion about our rivers. Just a very quick question. The audit being done by Audit New Zealand, given our discussion about costs of audits, is that being covered by them or by us?
I don't believe we're paying for it now. I should hope not. I'm going to send the bill back to them if we do.
Okay, because I mean, it's actually quite a positive thing because there's been a significant investment in rivers in our area, and it'll be great to see if they consider that that's actually, you know, been as productive as it can be. So it's actually quite an exciting thing to have happen, I think. It's great.
Oh, great. So Councillor Dow's moved the report. Councillor Kinamont?
Thank you. I'm willing to second as well. You've taken gravel out from smaller rivers and tributaries. Page 64. Some of these smaller rivers and tributaries, off your top of your head, have you got an idea of some of who they are and reasons for removing the gravel?
That one in particular, I believe, is the Go Ahead Creek in Golden Bay. It was sort of an opportunistic accumulation. Somebody, local adjacent landowner, needed a bit of gravel, so we enabled that. The volumes in this table probably a bit light. We have much more in the queue, so the next rivers report will probably have quite a bit more that's been extracted. But again, shifting the perception of why we extract the gravel, and it's not as a sort of commercial supplier of aggregate. It always has to have a purpose, a river management purpose. But yes, we'll see the numbers as they go for sure.
And just something, a little thing for me, in terms of farmers on rivers can take out 5 cube annually, putting around their water troughs or other things, which they find, of course, to be inadequate as a volume. What's the process whereby that's reassessed, and if we wanted that to be changed?
I think the land and freshwater plan change would be the place that would be looked at. Because we are looking at gravel activities in that plan change. Otherwise, they can ask us to extract under our permitted consent, and if there's a river management need, they could do quite a bit more than that. But by right, yes, they can just back up a trailer, several trailers, and take 5 cubic meters of gravel every year.
And the process to permit further extraction for that purpose, is that onerous?
If it's under our consent, it's not terribly onerous. If there's a river management need, we handle the consent compliance and provide a permit. And typically if they want it just for their own purposes, typically they're not looking for 1,000 or 2,000 cubic meters. And that's, so they could come with an arrangement with an extractor like Solly's or somebody else to do a larger extraction and just provide them a piece of that, something like that.
Okay.
But if they wanted to get their own resource consent, that would be fairly onerous.
Yes, fairly. Thank you. Is there anything further? The report's been moved and seconded, so I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And we shouldn't be laughing about any abuse you might receive at these public meetings. You know, you come out of them alive, and oh God, he's gone over the hill, and it's been a reality of some of the meetings in the past. So there's been some pretty appalling behaviour, actually. So, yeah.
I do think we don't do ourselves any favors in that respect, in terms of having conversations, not necessarily getting back to people in a timely fashion, and that level of on the ground involvement, interaction, responsiveness. I think in a couple of years we will have very different atmospheres at these meetings.
Yeah, it'll help with frustration. Okay. Thank you very much. Annual biosecurity report. Kuni, welcome.
Good morning. So today I've got myself, but brought Lindsay, the expert, along. So if you've got technical questions,
right,
that will be helpful. So I'll take the report as read. So we're presenting both the operational plan review for last year and the operational plan going forward. So this covers the activities under our Tasman Nelson Regional Pest Management Plan, and the review covers everything that's been done under the RPMP by our team here, by Tasman Biosecurity team, as well as the Nelson Biosecurity team, Docklands, community groups and landowners. And so there's quite a lot of work covered in that report. So I'll just point out a few key bits that we're quite keen for you to be aware of. So we've had a real focus on our eradication species this year. The most famous is always Taiwan cherry, and we've really increased our education and compliance efforts around this to try and really reduce the infestation down to key sites. And that's been really successful. And while we do have a handful of compliance issues, we actually have really good support when we talk to landowners, and we're really, really grateful for those landowners being so accommodating. I think it's really good to remember that most people are really helpful in this space when we explain the problem. The marine biosecurity program has been really successful, and we've had 3 incursions of Sabella come in on boats from outside of the region. So it shows the importance of that surveillance. And they've come from high-risk ports that we know about. And so that's really highlighting why we keep pushing for a national pathway plan to support the work that we do on the top of the South. It's really the long-term goal is to have clean hulls all over the country so that we're reducing that risk. You will notice some increase in the sites for eradication and progressive containment pests. And this is really a direct result of increase in surveillance through having an additional permanent biosecurity staff member. It makes a big difference. And there's some quite nice correlations that we're seeing, which highlight some issues around pests interacting, I suppose. So boxthorn we did include a picture of the boxthorn sites, which correlate with where goats hang out. So we're seeing when we've done a big survey for boxthorn, it's correlating with where the goats are. So they're not helping us with controlling that pest. And also up in Kingsland, so we've had variegated thistle pop up. The harvest up there removed the pine trees and the variegated thistle, of which that seed's probably been in the ground for about 30 years or before those trees were planted, and suddenly they're popping up again. So just shows how long these things can hang around for, but also shows how great our planning team for Kingsland have been, because they were ready for that pest control. They knew it was coming, and they had that in their plan for the replanting. We've also highlighted some work on a number of new and emerging pests, and we're trying to show how much extra resource that takes. It's really a really important role of a biosecurity officer to nail those early emerging pests before they become a problem. That's the most cost-effective way to get on top of things. But it does take quite a lot of effort with surveillance, investigation and management of those new pests. And the operational plan going forward this year, pretty much the same as last year, other than we've completed the partial review. So that's brought in a few new pests to look at and to get to know. And really this year will be about learning those new rules, socialising those new rules, and working with landowners to understand them. So really an education focus before we move to compliance. And a key change that you'll need to be aware of is that this year's operational plan, we're using a stricter interpretation of the Biosecurity Act's use for cost recovery. So under the Biosecurity Act, we can technically recover all costs for surveillance and compliance. That would be pretty unfair on people if we did that. But what we've moved to is basically we have an education first process. We work with the landowner. If it moves to a compliance or notice of direction, which is fairly rare, we don't do this very often, but generally we give a notice of direction. If we then go back and re-inspect that and the notice of direction hasn't been followed, then we're going to start recovering the cost of that that compliance going forward. So I think that won't be a particularly common thing, but I think that brings in a fairer system for our general ratepayers. And we are requesting a minor amendment to the RPMP Sustained Control Program for the gorse and broom program in Sananad. And it's a very small change to the boundary. It affects only 3 landowners, and in general, it's basically a cost saving for the effort in that particular area, which we're asking you to approve. Yeah. Any questions?
Councillor Butler has a question or comment.
Yeah, thanks, Gwynnie. You know, it's everything's moving forward, which is great. Look, I've just got a question about the boxthorn and the goats, and you know, this work, your work intersects with the Native Habitats Tasman work, where we're doing ecological surveys to identify significant natural areas, and I'm aware that goats have been are really constituting possibly the major threat and to our biodiversity. And I'm just wondering if we could have a comment on that. I know that we can't, it's not actually in the regional pest management plan, as a lot of our pests aren't. But it would be just interesting to know what controls are going on around the place for the goats.
So goats are generally managed through DOC, is the biggest, the manager around Tasman. We would love to be able to manage goats, but it would be very expensive. And so we are working, we do work with DOC on currently working on a strategy for goats and ungulates in general across top of the south, and that's through the Kotahitanga Motatao Alliance. That's pretty early on, but recognising that it's a big problem on the top of the south. There is also been a project through Project Janzoon. They got DOC community funding to remove all the goats across what they call the halo, the Abel Tasman halo, but it's basically the what would we call it, East Takaka through to Abel Tasman, that sort of block in there have had all of the goats removed. And so we're doing some monitoring through there on some of those Native Habitats Tasman sites to see the effect on removing those goats from those sites, mostly on threatened plants. So definitely in our sites, but trying to do that within limited resources.
Thank you. Thanks. Look, I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I mean, I was looking at the budget here as while Celia was speaking, listening as well, of course. But you know, it's a pretty tiny budget in here, really, isn't it? And we probably all should really take a note of that. And I was going to ask, you know, it's a bit of a Christmas question, isn't it? You know, if you had twice the budget that you've got, you know, what would that achieve?
Oh yeah, speaking the dream. I mean, the reality is, the more biosecurity officers, the more that would be the goal, really, because it's the eyes out on the ground and the ability to react quickly requires professionals, and we have Yeah, we have a very small biosecurity team when you look across the country, and that's that's just the reality of having a small ratepayer base. But if I had the team of an equivalent land area in the likes of Northland or Auckland, who have over 50, over 60 in Northland, yeah.
And given the size of our region, we're fourth largest region geographically, aren't we? In terms of councils. I mean, I just think it's good that we're aware of the budget, that we have a hand in these things. Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Dowler.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. Lindsay Barber's that AKA Media Star, Barber. Great job on the Taiwanese cherry. Was really impressive that you got that amount of coverage. This photograph that we've got on page 107 of those little sawfly larvae munching through the old man's beard is pretty amazing. So, how can we get more of them? How can we expand it? How can we actually, get rid of old man's beard?
Yes, so we've actually placed another order in for more sawflies, so there'll be more releases in February, March. That's a great photo in there, as you say, but it's a concentrated. There's 500 sawflies in a polystyrene box, so they were all munching away. So the impacts are probably not quite that significant in the wild, but nevertheless, any hit on their vitality is a good hit, So. And it may well be, one of the neat things about when you do introduce a biocontrol agent is you don't, are there wasps out there that might take them, or are there other predators to the biocontrol agents that are out there that might stifle their success? And the good thing about these sawflies is they actually emit a pheromone that gives them some, that makes them unattractive to vestibular wasps, to the German and common wasps, which is a good thing. The paper wasps, it might be a different story, but it can only be hoped that these things will really take off and that there aren't the predators. Where the sawflies was sourced from Serbia, and can only be hoped that some of the predators of sawflies over there they're not here in New Zealand, and that they really take off. And that's exactly what happened with the golden flea beetle for ragwort. They basically, ragwort just absolutely collapsed because the predators of the golden flea beetle weren't here to predate them. So, fingers crossed that we've got a good situation with the sawfly. Yeah.
And so, when we're examining what we're doing with it, are we collecting information to understand whether the population of the sawfly is increasing? Is that part of our data collection process?
Yeah, so Manaki Whenua Landcare Research have given me a monitoring form, and I've actually already been out about a week ago, because warm days in November are the times that you'll see the females in particular flying around. I couldn't detect any, but that's, and I'll give it another crack in another couple of weeks' time, but that's probably reflects the weather patterns that we've had, cooler, wetter weather. So they just probably haven't emerged yet. So that monitoring, that ongoing monitoring, we have to report back to. It's a requirement of the release that we have to report back to Manaki Whenua. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Councillor Dowler, and then Board Member Knowles and Councillor Shellcrest.
An awesome report. I actually read the whole thing twice. I was taken by it. I was really wrapped, and reading everything you've done in the budgets and everything like that, how you've come in under budget on quite a few bits and pieces. It's really good. The thing that blew me away was the koi carp piece about someone releasing that. I thought the person who used to do that had actually passed away. because we haven't had the dynamite going off in the ponds like we used to get once the carp was discovered. So and then I read it was eel, so that was fine. But no, amazing. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Board Member Knowles?
Yes, thank you for the report. I also agree that, Golden Bay does, excuse me. Does have its infestations. One of them I was a little bit concerned about in reading the report was the wild ginger. Excuse me. Pessimistic outlook. That kind of scares me a little bit. Is there anything we can do? Have we lost it?
Right, so Manaki whenua have been trying to introduce, it's a great big weevil that hits the Kahila ginger out of India, and they've been trying for about 20 years and have had no success because of it's a very bureaucratic process to get any biocontrol agents out of India. So at this stage, the only thing that we've got is basically chemical control. And it is a concern. And Golden Bay, the environmental conditions in Golden Bay are ideal for ginger, unfortunately. It's just trying to get landowners on board with the fact that it is a highly invasive species, and that there is a requirement for them to remove it. Is about all we can do is just sort of push that message. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the results of it up north, up in Northland.
It's terrible.
Absolutely devastating the forests up there. So we don't want it down here to do that.
No.
Councillor Shawcross?
Yeah, just a real quick one on these Serbian sawflies. What do they cost?
Yeah, they're $7,000 a release. So this might sound like a lot of money, but there's been years and years of research gone into making sure that they host specificity, and they are. So in New Zealand, we've got 9 species of native clematis, and old man's beard is Clematis vitelba, so it's in the same genus as other as our native clematis. So we've got to make Manaki whenua, when they do all the research, have to make absolutely sure that it's not going to jump and an impact on other native species. So they tested them on 6 native species of clematis and found that they weren't attracted to it at all. That they're really, really quite specific to old man's beard, to that particular clematis. So it's a good thing.
And how many is in a release?
About 500 or 600, I think 550, 600 larvae in one release. So it's good value.
Yeah, good black market for that, I reckon.
Yes. Were they the creatures you brought in here? Those little critters, yeah. Yeah, show and tell, it's great. Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, Chair. Question on sustained control pests that says occupiers of land affected by these species are required to destroy guided by an authorised person. We're talking about old man's beard, banana passion fruit, usual offenders, climbing asparagus, of course. Do we have a policy for policing our own parks? And because if we were to go out and expect other people to do it, in regards to, do we actually issue a notice and say, actually, you've got an infestation here in your park? And then are we following it up and making sure that our own yard is tidy as such?
We do work very closely with the other colleagues across the council to help them do the RPMP work. They are very proactive. And Taiwan Cherry, they've been really proactive, very helpful. So sustained control is about holding the line. So it's tricky to enforce exactly, get rid of absolutely every single thing. It's put in that program and the understanding that we won't get rid of every single plant, but we do make an effort to clean up our parks first. And yeah, fully commend our parks team for making that effort. Yeah.
Do you think, from what you've seen, we are sustaining it? Do you think they're making progress, or do you think they need more funding to just clear up a few areas? What's your overview of that? You can be honest. It's okay.
I would say they do just what we do, which is prioritise eradication and progressive containment, and then do the best they can with sustained control. So, yeah, I suspect I don't know what their budget is, but I suspect it's not enough.
Okay, thank you, because that's my suspicion. My suspicion is a little bit more resource in a few areas would make a very big difference, and it might be funding a particular spot that everyone knows about. They're just stuck there because they don't have the resources. So that answers that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just reading about the refreshing about Woolly Nightshade and Golden Bay, and sort of holding the line of their knot, and yeah, similar, I suppose. Did Project Divine deal with some of that over there?
Yeah, we work closely with Project Divine, and they're doing a great job for us, to be honest. Yeah, they're working on banana passion vine, old man's beard, and woolly nightshade for us in Golden Bay. Yeah.
So we contract them directly.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's another part of this puzzle, isn't it? So Kim was just showing me before the performance report of TET and the way the funding they get, and the ways that we're working in with various agencies, I guess, is necessary given the inadequate budget actually, and it's a key aspect, isn't it, that people are working together and trying to chip away at.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Project Divine are good value for the council too. They're as a contractor, their costs are low, and so we get a good bang for our buck when we use them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty effective too, aren't they? They've been through our place a couple of
Absolutely.
times. Yeah. Yeah. We're dealing with their own. We're working away all the time, every year on, banana passion fruit and woolly nightshade and things, and then having them come sweeping through with a team of 4 or 5 through our big gully. It's amazing what they can deal to quickly.
Yeah, they've got a very dedicated team. So,
yes.
Yeah, it's great.
They seem to like what they're doing.
Yeah, they do.
Sliding around in the mud and through gorse. And
falling through the blackberry and
yeah. Yeah, they're pretty impressive actually. Councillor Chilcris.
I'm just back to the Serbians. Just got my head going here. How many of those little critters are munching away in that polystyrene box? Is there 1 or is there 500?
No, that's about 500 in one box. So if you were here and you at the council meeting when we had the polystyrene box, there were 500 odd in that box. Yeah. So and there was there was quite a bit of old man's beard in there. So it was probably covering a lot of them that had dropped down to the bottom of the box, but there were definitely around 5. In fact, Land Care Research, Naki Whenua said that they had it right down to I think it was 547. So they've counted everyone that they've put in the box. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the feasibility going in my head on that one. And do they reproduce these things?
Hopefully, yeah, that's the idea. No. So you might think, why 500? But there's minimum. You need a minimum population to get a good establishment. You need good genetic diversity within that population as well. So if we were to just release, say, 10 of them and keep our fingers crossed that nothing ate them and that they bred up, you'd lose a lot of genetic diversity, the gene alleles. So you would lose that. So that's the idea behind releasing a lot of them, 500 odd.
And I think you guys have got such a cool job.
It's a relevant question, isn't it? How do you count a crowd? Sort of, isn't it? Very current.
Yeah, that's right.
How many people on those streets and how many creatures in the box? With the blue passion flower and fruit, is it an edible passion fruit? It's not. It's not. It doesn't taste as good as it looks.
Yeah, it is edible, but it's not as good as a black.
It's not the black one that you typically grow in your backyard. No. So it does have a pretty flower, and it does grow edible fruit, but no one's, when we've asked to remove it, no one's been particularly concerned about that. So
it's a very small fruit. It's only about that big, so it's not very big. But I've tried one. They taste okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a black passion fruit any day.
Yeah, divine, aren't they? Is there anything further? We need somebody to move the report, I think. We've got that? Oh, Councillor Butler moved, that's right. And we've
I'm happy to second.
you happy to second? So we're receiving the report, receiving the management plan review, receiving the management plan, operational plan, and the Gorse and Broome. Very good. I'll put the Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Could I just check in terms of the proposed change to the boundary? Is any of that going to come to as a surprise to the landowners?
No, we've spoken with Doc, and they've got land right in behind it, and we've talked to them about it. The only concern that slight concern that they had was that because that's a tributary to Harley Creek is a tributary to the Buller, and the Buller River is already infested further down with broom, so it's not going to make a lot of difference at all. It'll just mean maybe a little bit more seed will go into the Buller River. But they had, and the other two landowners one of the landowners is quite elated because it means that they will not be required anymore to control their broom, and the other one's fine as well. So no, it's all good.
Good question. Anything further? I'll put the resolutions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much. We'll shoot here. That's everything, isn't it? The workshop. Yes, the workshop for this afternoon has been brought forward to a 12:30 start. So it was due to start at 1:30. Hope you can get your egg sandwiches in that time. And just to acknowledge, this is our last meeting of the year for Environment and Regulatory. So thank you, Ro, for your work today and your support of the committee through the year since we have been. And thank you, Kim, to you and your team. The standard of reporting and advice that's offered here is very, very good, and I think we're very well served. And some of it's pretty interesting too. Yeah. And thank you, committee members, for your considered and thoughtful approaches to the work that gets presented here. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for those comments, Chair. I'd also like to extend appreciation to Rob's team and John's team, because the environment brings in so many moving parts of the council, and I think the standard you see is and you're commenting on is right across the board, and it shows it's a real great opportunity to connect all the dots so that the work that we're doing, it becomes quite meaningful to staff, and I think you see that in their eyes. When people are reporting to this committee, there's a real sense of achievement, a sense of pride comes through as well. So yeah, just want to sort of extend that, pass on that extra comment you made, and then make sure the other groups, get the sense that they're part of the success as well.
Thank you for that little tidy up. Thank you, and it just brings us to have a karakia to close. Karakia tātou, tāwhiri maanga hua o te taiao, mai a papa tuanuku e tākoto nei, kia rangi nui e tu e hionei, titiri whakamaua kia tina, hui e, kai kia. Thank you, everybody.